All right, thank you, Carolyn. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Ben Wolf, who has been a longtime faculty member and a former department chair and is now currently the director of the Academic Support Center at the University of Kansas Edwards campus. He is very well known and having given several talks about this topic, so it is my great pleasure to introduce him to all of you. So take it away, Ben.
Thanks, Bernardi. Thank you, Carolyn and Chris. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Welcome, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, depending upon where you're at in the country this morning. As Bernardi said, my name is Ben Wolf. I'm currently at the University of Kansas at our Edwards campus, which is in the Kansas City metropolitan area. I'm the director of our Academic Support Center, which provides a lot of academic program and faculty development support. And part of that is to work with academic units and the leadership in those units to with leadership and management and kind of working through organizational change. So I'm excited to be able to talk to you guys today. Before that, as Bernardi said, I was for 12 years a full-time faculty member at the Metropolitan Community College in Kansas City, where 5 years I was the division chair for the Natural and Social Sciences Department, which was 9 academic disciplines, about 13 full-time faculty, and almost 35 to 40 part-time faculty. So have experience running a department, working with academic leadership, and kind of leading faculty, or sometimes what we call herding cats, right, through change. So next, please, Carolyn. So today, kind of the outcomes I hope that you can take away from this webinar is some strategies for how you can lead your department or your academic unit through difficult change, or through planning, or if you're facing resistance, ambiguity, how some strategies that you might approach in terms of communication and management that would help facilitate movement towards change. And so to start there, I'd like for you to kind of think about the current department or the current unit that you are the head of, and kind of maybe go through, and if you have a piece of paper, kind of write down some of these answers to these questions, and as we kind of go through the webinar here, you can kind of think about some of the strategies that might apply to some of these questions. And so if you look at your department or your unit, look at who's in your group. Is it research faculty? Is it faculty and staff? Is it graduate students? Is it teaching faculty? So think about who is in your group. And then second, what is the major purpose of your department? Is it for graduate students? Is it for academic research? Anything along those lines. And so think of the major purpose that you believe that your department is filling in this category. And then within that group, what are the members' responsibility? Are they working together on that group, or is there a lot of individuals and individual tasks that's part of this whole department and looking at outcomes and how you're getting there? And then we're going to talk a lot about communication today. And so think about how information flows amongst all the members of your unit. Is it good information? Is it not good information? Is there information flowing? These are things to think about. And then out of that, who's held accountable? Is it you, the chair? Is it the deans that's putting pressure on the chair? So think about who's the accountable person for when these objectives are being accomplished. Within that, what's the emphasis? Is it on competition? If it's individual, is there a lot of competition, or is it collaborative? Is it more of a working together as a group as you're looking at change? And often tied to that are rewards. So if it's competition, that might be rewards based upon that. If it's a group reward, then it would facilitate collaboration. And then what terms would you use to describe the current behavior in your group? So those are kind of some things that kind of set the stage as we start looking at leading a department through change. Next, please. So when you first start looking at organizational change and change theory and leadership theory, one of the key things is to, as I kind of laid out there, thinking about your group, is to start where they're at. And I rely a lot on leadership theory from James Maxwell. He is known for many books on leadership, on teamwork. This is Stages of Morale. It's from his 17 Indisputable Laws of Teamwork. that really kind of lays out how do I start with my unit or my group and move them through this change process. And some of you might be at stage 1 of this 4-stage morale. Others of you that are lucky enough to be at stage 4 will have a different approach in getting successful change through your department. Some of you might be here with a very key starting point, which is what Maxwell calls stage 1 or poor morale. And in poor morale, the leader really must do everything to kind of kickstart this change process. Poor morale would be active disengagement, purposeful disengagement by faculty, rebellion, strong resistance to any sort of new idea, and that would be what we would call stage 1, this poor morale. And so really, if you are facing this with your department, you need to start at the beginning, and that's simply by just initiating belief, showing people in your department that you believe in them and you believe in yourself, and that change can be a success through this, and that they are capable of moving in the direction that would be better for the department, for the unit, for the university, the college, the students. One of the most time-consuming and energy-draining is creating energy, and that's being energetic about moving your department to a new place. If you think about your any time where you've been in a classroom, or think back to your favorite faculty member or teacher when you were an undergraduate or graduate student, what made you connect to them? A lot of it is they were energetic. They had passion about their discipline, and that passion really showed through and connected well with students. Well, if you're energetic in your leadership position, energetic about moving towards new objectives or new change, that will go a long way in helping to carry the rest of your faculty, your colleagues, graduate students along with you. And probably the most important, and we're going to keep coming back to this theme throughout today's webinar, is communication. And in poor morale, really it's communicating hope. It's helping them to see the potential and the benefits of moving towards either teamwork or a goal or change. Next. So stage 2 is not starting from scratch. It's where you have just low morale, maybe where there's not active disengagement, but there's just low morale. People are just feeling discouraged. This would probably be very typical of many climates right now at higher ed, with political pressure, with money, just this kind of general dread and feeling of just, where are we going, sort of an atmosphere. And unlike in the stage 1, where the leader must do everything to kickstart it, here you're building off a little bit of that foundation where, as a leader, you must be doing productive things. So in other words, you're modeling behavior that you expect of your faculty in your department or division. So for example, if the dean has come and said, we are going to do learning outcomes for your program because accreditation is right around the corner and there's low morale, this would be coming in and instead of just telling faculty, guess what, go make learning outcomes, but actually sitting down in the trenches with them and working together as a group, modeling that behavior by saying, I'm going to create learning outcomes for the class that I'm teaching or for these program outcomes. So it's kind of being with the rest of the colleagues and modeling what you expect of them. In low morale, one of the key things is to identify people that you have potential and really develop relationships, because they're going to be your worker bees in moving the rest of the group towards higher morale. So if you see some individuals that have a little bit more potential or be able to be more productive in what they're doing, latching on to those and letting them kind of carry forward and actually winning some small victories, that will help the rest of the group move towards that common goal as well. So again, the next one is small victories, and those are incredibly important when you have low morale. Just showing that there is some good that's happening will go a long way to help bring along folks that maybe are still stuck in stage 1, and that hope piece kind of carries forward. And again, as I said, communication is critical. Now in low morale, it's really focused on the vision. where are we going, and giving them that goal, that endpoint to strive for. Next. So stage 3 is now where you're into this middle ground, where you're starting to have some small successes, where you're starting to see these small victories building up, and more engagement is happening now by your team, by your department, or your unit. And this is what Maxwell calls the moderate morale stage. And so now, instead of doing everything or doing productive things, now you actually are freeing up time as the leader to be focused more on difficult things, focused on those key areas or gaps that need to be addressed to just make it over that hump to the success and to high morale. So in this case, whereas you're no longer trying to do everything or you're trying to create the vision, you're now tweaking things where you're making changes that make the team better. So you're identifying in those productive faculty members or the members of the group where there might be gaps. You're putting people in different seats. So this is, the good to great model, putting the right people on the bus, but then you need to arrange them where they go on the bus. Some people are better drivers, some people are better in other areas. And so now it's arranging the pieces here within the team to really capitalize upon the strengths of all the individual team members. Here you now have the vision in place. Now it's kind of using the team members to get buy-in. To really embrace then and then be acolytes going out to those that are still in the lower stages of morale to help excite them about where we're going and getting them on board. When you get to moderate morale, now it's not so much about creating the vision, but now it's about showing commitment that we're going to get there. So communication now switches from this kind of end goal to we're committed to getting there, and that's demonstrated by you as the leader, rewarding successes, reiterating commitment. It might be where you're actually putting money involved with this, or you're putting incentives involved with that to kind of just get that rest of the team towards the committed movement towards that end goal. And now it's also where you're going to be investing in your team. And then when you invest in your team is going to succeed out of that. Next. So hopefully, we all want our teams and our departments to be moved towards this last stage, stage 4, which Maxwell calls high morale. And this is the reward for all that hard work starting in stage 1 all the way up here to stage 4, where now the leader doesn't have to do everything or even the most difficult thing. Now the leader is doing the little things. It's serving as the curb to kind of keep everybody on the same path and just causing little tweaks here and there to keep everybody moving forward towards that change. So here, high morale, you are now focused as a leader on successes and focus on that, where you're really now celebrating successes and showing the value of moving towards this change. You are now, those that didn't ever get on the bus, you've now removed them completely out, and now you are actually spending more time preventing obstacles from creating barriers or reducing momentum towards that change. And so really your role now no longer is to carry everybody along, it's now to stand out in front and move away the barriers that would slow continued movement forward. One of the great things, and as a chair here, what hopefully you're thinking about is succession, is when I'm no longer chair, when I'm no longer a leader, how am I developing the future leaders of the department or the unit? And when you have high morale, this is a great opportunity to start to let others step up and take on leadership activities. There's a wonderful momentum that's been building here through this change process, and now you can actually have an opportunity for people that show interest, that show potential, that show a desire, to let them take on some leadership roles and more visibility within the unit and the department. And then this creates really a continued cycle of success that will just keep constantly feeding back on the high morale of your team. So go ahead to the next slide, Carolyn. So if you build, kind of moving through these stages of morale and getting to this stage of high morale, really what we're talking about is building an organizational environment that is empowering. And if you're looking at leading through change or trying to overcome resistance and ambiguity, you need to create an environment where individuals within that organization really feel empowered. And so stage 4 really then is the culmination of all of this leading up to clear vision, openness, teamwork, support, sense of security, which in turn, your team members are going to be more likely to take risks, they're more likely to experience success, and then they're going to feel empowered. And so really, the key thing here is change is giving people the opportunity to feel empowered to be able to affect change and be a part of that change and help direct that change. So go to the next slide, please. So now, that being said, I'm not saying this is, I'm not going to be Pollyannish here and say that this is an easy thing. You just go 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're there. Obviously, resistance and ambiguity are real barriers. And you might have a situation where you have some people that are already at high morale. You might have some that are at low morale or no morale, right? And so there's a continuum process here. One of the key things in implementing change is to really early on recognize what are the barriers that might affect organizational change here. And this is from Connor and some organizational theory. This is from their book, Managing Organizational Change. They break out kind of 3 barriers that really arise in groups that prevent or inhibit change from occurring. And the first is what's called barrier to appreciation. And this is more of a thought-based type of a barrier where the organizational members just don't understand what the change is or the outcomes, or there's just a reluctance to even believe it's going to happen. And we've all heard this, right? When the dean comes down and says, we want you to do this, somebody goes, yeah, we tried that 4 years ago, it didn't really happen, right? I outlived that dean, I can outlive this dean. I mean, that's kind of this whole idea of a barrier to appreciation, not really understanding where is change coming from and how is that change really important, or if in fact it's really going to occur. The second is kind of a barrier to acceptance, and this is more of a fear-based barrier where this change that's coming might be a threat to organizational members. It might be a threat to their job. It might be a threat to their power that they have. It might be a change of their responsibility, and they may not have self-confidence or security when you have change. And this is very, very common, right? When change occurs, it creates anxiety. It creates, what is that environment going to look like? And sometimes that can be paralyzing. And so that fear then sets up a barrier, and so I'm not going to do it. And then the last one is then that I'm not really going to do it, which is the barrier to acting. And a lot of it's, can I do it? You know, if I come in and say, we're all going to now move towards online course delivery, and none of the faculty really have ever used Blackboard, none of them have taught online before, there's this capacity. Can they do it? Right? So it goes back to anxiety because they don't know if they can do it, and then there's a capacity, which is if nobody's been trained to do that, how can they do that? And so this is a lot of organizational barriers. We want you to do X, but we don't have any money for it, right? So there's that barrier to acting. So go to next. So how can I now address, knowing those barriers and knowing those different types of barriers that exist, how can I start to overcome those different barriers? And going back to kind of the stage of morale, the common one that appeared in all of those stages was communication. And so really when you're looking at change and leading through change, it's really important to try to figure out a model of communication that you would want to use in helping to bring the members through that change. And this is from Ford and Ford called 4 Conversations. This is some communication models that they put forth. And so the first is what's called an initiative communication model, which is really what you do early on. It's coming into a group that is resistant to change and starting the conversation of why are we doing this? So when the dean comes and says, we need you to do learning outcomes, and the faculty say, why are we doing this? You're able to say, we're doing this because accreditation is in 2 years and we need to have these things in place. All right? So you're giving them concrete facts and you're telling them why. And then followed on that is what now? So it's not just we're going to do it, it's what now? Well, we're going to bring in some training. I'm going to bring in the Center for Teaching Excellence in. We're going to bring in an outside consultant. I'm going to work with you to develop outcomes, anything along those lines of concrete examples of why we're doing this, what's next. And the more details you can provide early on, especially impacts, the better and more successful you will be in helping to lead your group through that change. The second model is to come in and use what's called an understanding communication model. And this would be where you have a very disgruntled group where there's a lot of resistance in terms of kind of a fear-based. So it's replacing rumors with facts, right? We're not doing learning outcomes because we're going to hire a bunch of adjuncts and grad assistants to teach, or we're going to impugn on academic freedom. We're doing this because this is what's going to make it better for us to show and demonstrate that our students are achieving what we need them to achieve. So that's taking a rumor and then replacing it with fact. Another key thing is an understanding is allowing the participants in change to feel and grab onto some ownership of that change. So allowing them to brainstorm, provide input, solicit ideas, provide solutions that might be a viable path towards successful change. If they feel that they're a part of it, the more apt they're going to buy into it. The other key thing is to listen and acknowledge the feelings. There is real fear there, so it's acknowledging that change is hard. Yes, we all know change is difficult, and not saying grow up and deal with it. It's, you're right, change is hard, and we will walk through this together, and we will come out with successes that will make it rewarding, and we'll be doing things better than we were before. And then lastly, ensure that your communication is in kind of a cultural, organizational terms. So I've been kind of using the example of learning outcomes. Maybe your organization calls them objectives. If you're talking about outcomes, but nobody knows what outcomes are, but they know what objectives are, making sure that you're using the same language where everybody is clear and understands what's being talked about. Next. The third one is more of a performance, is really focusing on the individual can make an important and significant contribution to the change. So again, being involved with the process of change, but then also really letting and helping individuals see why change is necessary. So starting from the why do we need to do this, this is dumb, but communicating in such a way that says, well, here's why we're doing it, and this is the outcome that's going to make it easier for you to do your job, or it's going to be better for the department, or student success is going to increase, and we're going to have more retention. If you show the positive aspects of that change, it will help these individuals that are struggling with, can I do this change? That self-confidence, that performance will help them through that change process, especially if they are allowed to help define what the problem is and work on the solutions through that. And then last, which probably is what we're all poor on, and I know my institution is, and probably you could cite examples at your own institution, is the closure part here. We need to acknowledge that there were early pioneers when change first happened, whether that was a decade ago, 15 years ago, or even 4 years ago. And there were champions that brought about significant change then. When you have new change coming, and if you just completely dismiss that old change, you've dismissed those individuals and all the work that they've contributed before. It's really important that you allow folks that were part of previous change to really discuss the history of that change, their feelings about that change, celebrate what they did, and honestly, it's kind of like a death. You're putting away old practices that used to be good and moving on with new practices, letting folks that were part of that previous process mourn the fact that they're moving away from that, which they put a lot of sweat and tears and work into and did some really great things, and now we're moving in a different direction. It's letting them to mourn that, but then including them and actually pulling out elements of that past practice and bring it into the new change will help bring those individuals along as well. Here is where you really need to have that vision of where you're going and why that is where they want to be along for the ride as well. Celebrating short-term wins is critical when you're looking at closure because you're putting away the old, you're taking on the new, and celebrating short-term wins will help folks see that going the new way is actually good for them as well. Next. So how can I then, once I've looked at this communication piece, and I'm now ready to address my members of my organization, in my department or in my unit, how am I going to now actually work on bringing about change? And so this is, again, going back to Connor et al., looking at 4 different change strategies in organizational change. And you can kind of mix and match here because I'm sure, as I said, it's a continuum of where your faculty or your staff are on when it comes to change here. Some of these pieces might work for some, but not all. But these are kind of the 4 key areas of change strategy. The first is what's called facilitative. Most of us probably in a shared governance type of institution have, this is the common one you see in universities. It's really a collaborative approach to change. It involves lots of large groups, lots of constituents involved in the process, and it's letting those that partake in that determine what the process of implementation is going to be. This is often very long and tedious and slow, right? We all say that higher ed moves at a very slow pace. I've always said it moves at a glacier speed. I've heard the aircraft carrier turning around sort of analogies, but this is really what facilitative is. The second type of change strategy is informational, where if you have, and this often works for science disciplines, where you have a very rational, logical thinking faculty, and if you can just get the facts out, they'll say, okay, I see it, let's do it, right? And so it's communicating in the language that the faculty or the staff can understand, and if you get clear reasons of why we're going to do this, they say, okay, I'm on board. So we're going to do learning outcomes. Why are we doing learning outcomes? Because we need to, because it's part of the accreditation process. All right, I'm on board, right? So you kind of informational, you lay it out. Probably the most difficult one in a change strategy is attitudinal. This is the one that takes the longest amount of time because this is really, and I'll show you another slide here, it's transformational change. It's changing the entire attitude of your organization or your unit or your department here. This is changing perceptions. So this one is one that requires a lot of listening, a lot of closure, looking back, understanding feelings, using experiences and stories to help individuals transition from the old to the new. Now the last one is one that's always been around. It's the big stick one, which is political and power. It's the I scratch your back, you scratch mine, or it's the you're going to do this because I'm telling you to do this type of strategy. So go to next. So of those change strategies, just kind of delve just real briefly, really quickly into each one and how you would use those. I kind of talked a little bit about this in the previous slide, but so when would you use facilitative? Well, facilitative is important when change is extensive. So if you're going to come in and you're going to change the core curriculum of the university or the curriculum of the department, that would be a key one to use facilitative change strategy, right? You are including each member as part of that process. You're allowing them to be part of the process, and everybody has an important part in making or conducting that change. I put up there resistance is minimal. Oftentimes, though, in facilitative, you can have resistance that's not quite so minimal, but there is a general acceptance that, okay, we need to change our core curriculum. How are we going to do that? Okay, so it's kind of working together. Now, there might be lots of different ideas on how to get there, but that's what a facilitative approach is. Informational is when change is extensive and a large amount of info is needed. So coming in this case, where we talk about using the core curriculum example, instead of saying we need to change our core curriculum and people saying, okay, we need to update it, it's coming in and saying we need to change our core curriculum because our 4-year graduation rate is abysmal and there's no way anybody can graduate in 4 years with 145 credit hours. We need to break that down to 125 or whatever. That's providing information that allows folks to think about it and make rational decisions. So this is really looking at coming in with the information and laying it all out for everybody that's involved. Next. So attitudinal, as I said, is the most extended and difficult, but out of the ones I've talked about so far, this is the most deep and lasting change that can happen, because what you're doing is you are attitudinally changing the entire culture of an organization. So this is really, truly transformational. Now, to do that requires what's called modification of restraining force. It's called the unfreeze, move, refreeze behavior. So what that means, and to kind of translate that for you, is you have existing attitudes. So you need to break down those attitudes, loosen them up, then change their attitudes to where you want to go, and then freeze them. So that way they have those new attitudes. And once they have those new attitudes, then change will be more successful, and you can implement often huge landmark-breaking modifications. This is a very slow process, very, very slow process. It requires, again, a lot of leadership, really looking at high morale, moving towards that stage 4, building strong teams. Lots of individual team leaders are key for this to be successful. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the political or power, it's sometimes necessary. I mean, sometimes the time is of the essence. We need to do this because accreditation is happening next year, right? And so you have to use immediate effect. However, long term, this will not be sustainable. People will do what you tell them to do if you use a stick on them, but they won't like it and nothing will last. So really, you want to look at the other 3 options, but this is there if you need an immediate change. Typically if it's a small change or with small groups here. But it is not a long-term solution and is one that you only want to use very rarely, if ever at all. Hopefully, if you're at a stage 4 morale, this would never be on the table, because you would be able to do facilitative or attitudinal change, because you've brought the rest of your team to a stage where they're more accepting and feel empowered again to do that change. Next. So to kind of sum up what we've been talking about today, and really to kind of put it in your place here. So if you go back and look at what I asked you to do at the very beginning, kind of laying out your team and the individuals in your team, and you think back through what we've talked about. So kind of moving forward from here with that situation, think about some sort of change that you're facing in your department, or something that's on the horizon that you know about, and start to look at your role as the chair or the leader of that unit. And start thinking about, how can I get my constituents all through those different stages of morale to stage 4? How can I make them feel empowered? Building common goals and outcomes is critical to get folks to stage 4 and give them that empowerment aspect to it. Communication is one of the most important things that we always hear. We always complain about administrators never communicating. Well, you know, demonstrate to your group what good and effective communication is. Providing that information, providing facts, giving them experiences to help them informed on their decision-making process. Facilitative is very, very important for buy-in, for everybody feeling like they've been part of and had a say in that change process. So group decision-making is incredibly important. But part of that means that people need to participate. And so it's really encouraging the quiet faculty or the quiet grad student or the staff member to be an included part in that entire decision-making process. Of course, with that group decision-making process and support is helping folks when they are looking at alternatives or solutions, providing the support necessary for them to pursue those avenues or those different solutions. So that supportive climate is critical for empowerment and people feeling safe enough to be able to do some outside-the-box type of thinking. Next. So at this point, I kind of went through a lot of information. A lot of it was leadership theory and organizational change theory, but I'm more than happy to answer some questions that folks might have. I also put on there some of the things that were cited in here. I highly recommend Maxwell. He had a lot of leadership theory, and in your role as chair, oftentimes I know myself, having been put in a chair's position where I didn't have a whole lot of management experience, I relied a lot on leadership texts and information to kind of help build teams and how do I lead a successful department. So if you're interested, I can always provide more information there as well, and I've left my email address on there as well. Feel free to contact me. But at this point, I'd like to open it up for questions.
Okay, thanks, Ben. So we will have our Q&A session. If you have any questions, please type it into the questions box on your panel, or if you would like to speak directly to Ben and you have a microphone, click the raise your hand button on your panel and we will unmute you and allow you to ask a question. So Ben, this was enlightening. I think a lot of this research is fairly new to our community, but essential for effective communication and work within a department. So how did you really get interested into this topic? In particular, were there any circumstances that you faced that made you really read up and learn about it?
Yeah, when I inherited the division, it was it was not at the stage one. It was really at stage two. The previous chair had been in the position a long time. They were kind of moving into phased retirement, and as often is the case, things were kind of just this left. And so when I came in, there wasn't a whole lot of direction, and so I wanted to be able to do some innovative things at the institution. There was a lot of push for more active, engaged learning and those sorts of things, but getting faculty to buy into and want to be a part of that was critical. And so looking at strategies to build teams and build teamwork, and then out of that teamwork, how do I then lead them towards change? And that's really what kind of raised some interest in this. And I gave a talk, a similar talk to this at GSA a couple of years ago that really illustrated, in my case, using interdisciplinary approaches and trying to build almost even more of a transdisciplinary approach to build themes amongst lots of different faculty.
Do you have any examples of some of the changes you were able to lead during your tenure as a division chair?
Sure. So one of the things that, as I was kind of alluding to, was a desire for some alternative course delivery formats. We had started facing some capacity issues with classroom space and scheduling, and then also a desire of our student population, which was a little bit more of a working adult population, to allow content and delivery of courses into more of a hybrid type approach. This was early on with the hybrid aspects, but there was a lot of resistance to that, and a lot of it was fear-based, not knowing what the technology was, not understanding how the technology worked. I had just had faculty that we had kind of forced into really using PowerPoint for the first time, and that was a huge step. And so now taking that and moving into an online environment is very scary. And so recognizing we couldn't come in and just do that immediately, but help build an environment that people felt secure in, and then providing the support necessary for them to be able to start to make that transition and make those small steps. One of the best advice I ever received was from a dean of students who reminded me that higher education is a marathon, not a sprint. And so it's recognizing that this is a slow process, but as with a marathon, as you keep working away at it, success does come.
All right. Remember, you can write questions in the question box if you have anything to ask. Do you have any advice for leading a small department with several individuals who have had past clashes or conflicts?
That's hard. Yeah, as I said, I led a division that was kind of a unique, eclectic mix. In the community colleges, we don't have enough faculty to form a science division, so oftentimes you'll see, in this case, it was two disparate disciplines, social science and science. And of course, I feel bad for the social scientists. They always felt left out because the biologists and the chemists all got the money, right? Because they were generating all these lab fees. And so it really goes back to team building and understanding and recognizing that there are some real hurts that perhaps have happened. This is going back to the listening part of it. And one of the best things that as a leader you can do is listen first, speak later, right, is to listen to the concerns and understand where they're coming, but then provide opportunities for interactions that are positive. So finding common goals between two members of the department, maybe where there has been clashes, find where they are in agreement on something or where they have a common goal. And sometimes that's student success, or it might be something that they're both doing in their classes that are very effective. It might be something that they're doing in their research or some common interest, and starting there. Now, you don't have to make them best friends by any stretch of the imagination, but there are ways to move individuals to be able to interact with each other professionally, and oftentimes that occurs when you're finding common ground. between two individuals.
What are some of the complications that can occur with the range of authority a chair has in the department, specifically when you're dealing with like regular faculty to staff members to soft money researchers or maybe joint appointees?
Yeah, the joke is, right, you're the first of equals as the chair, which means that you have absolutely no power at all, right? And I like it that they're herding cats, because that really is what the chair's responsibility is to do. And it can be difficult. I mean, it is difficult when you have individuals that are really interested in their research, and that's all, and some that are maybe off doing something else. And when you have adjuncts all the way up through full-time research faculty or even soft money appointments, it's difficult to really get them all on the same page. And that's where, going back to those stages of morale, it's finding a common purpose that resonates with everybody in that group. And they're there. Now, it may not be earth-shattering and groundbreaking. It might be that we want to produce the best geoscience graduates in this department. And it's just starting with something simple like that and then moving forward from there. And so it's finding a common purpose and common goal. And this might be a listening tour. It might be an opportunity to bring the department or the unit together and do some strategic planning to talk about, in terms of a facilitative way, helping everybody contribute to what is the common goal. And if they're all feeling like they're part of that process and finding that common goal, that might help bring all these different disparate individuals together and work towards that common goal. Now, we all know that you're always going to have that one or two that's not going to ever be on the board, and that's okay. You know, if you don't have 100% buy-in, life doesn't work that way. What your job then becomes is to help the ones that are interested and are eager and wanting to, is supporting them and getting them to that end goal and removing the barriers that would prevent them from doing that.
Let's take it the other direction. Do you find any complications dealing with the leadership above the departments?
Yeah, and that's the hard part is you know, how do I get my dean or the vice chancellor or the president or whatever leadership that's above you to buy into it? And that's where, really, in your role as a chair, you are the liaison between the faculty and the administration, right? And you're trying to balance both worlds, because there's things that the faculty need, there's things that the administration need, and you're being pulled in both directions. And so, in my experience, what I did was I found elements of the leadership's goals that I could attach my goals to and carry them forward. So we all have these strategic plans that our administrators have put in front of us, and they're all incredibly vague, and that's frustrating. But it also is really beneficial, because of their vagueness, you can almost apply really whatever goal that you're trying to do, as long as you can demonstrate it attaches to some sort of overarching outcome for the institution. Administrators are happy about that, because when your accrediting body comes along, they can point to and say, look what you're doing over here. Also, when you're at high morale and you have an empowered faculty, oftentimes you will get noticed. Here at the University of Kansas, the Environmental Studies Department is routinely pointed to as kind of the innovative folks. They're the ones out in the front. They're out there trying new things. And because they're doing all these new things and these cool things, and the chancellor can go out in the community and say, look what they're doing over here, sometimes that comes along with benefits where they're willing to invest more money in you, because they know that it's not going to be wasted, that they know that if you demonstrate that you say, this is a goal, we're going to do this, and you do it, the resources might come next time saying, look, if we invest in them, we know they're going to spend it wisely, we know that they're going to have success on the end of that. So it's really, that's empowerment of your faculty who make you look good, because when you look good, your administrators look good, and that's kind of how it works, right? So it's kind of building successes that demonstrate the value of your unit to the administrators.
Great. Do you have any advice to deal with continued reorganization of the administration hierarchy, from your department chairs through your vice presidents, or even like within, or what disciplines are taught within a department from semester to semester?
Yeah, one of the things that's constant about universities and colleges is that change is constant, right? That we always seem to have this constant turnover of leadership, and And sometimes that's when it becomes necessary to focus on what you can control. And if you're having this constant turnover of a dean or an administrator type position, instead of looking that direction, it's looking maybe the other direction as, okay, what can we do? Maybe that's not as a grander scale, but even more on a small level scale that can still build teams within the department, can still help move individuals to that level 4 morale. And so if chaos is ruling above you, it's turning downward and inward towards your department and controlling what you can control there. One of the things we can always do, and as I said, stage 4 doesn't mean you can just now coast, right? Stage 4 is the little things, it's the tweaking and those sorts of things. Think about how you teach your class. The first time you taught your class, like all the way back then, I guarantee you, if it was like me, it was kind of a disaster, right? But then the second time you taught it, it got better. By the third time, you knew what you were doing. And from then on, it was adding new material, taking things out, tweaking it, trying something different, right? The same thing is going to happen here. It's going to be incredibly difficult to move from lower stages of morale to that high stage. But once you're at that high stage, you're still going to be involved and actively working within your unit or your department to maintain that high morale.